Well, welcome to the Sisters in Loss podcast, Juauna.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So I would love for you to share with our listeners a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Okay. So I am an infertility life coach, and I help women, especially when they're ending the infertility or the medical side of the infertility journey, and they are childless, basically. And those feelings that come about when life isn't going as you're planning it, those feelings can be shame and jealousy and anger and lots of yucky feelings. And so I help women on that infertility journey to deal with those emotions.
Awesome. We're going to definitely talk more about that, but you have a story. So let's talk about your personal story. Take us back on your journey to motherhood and share with us your fertility journey.
Okay. So my infertility, I was later in life married, and I say later because within our church family, people would sometimes get married very early, 18, 19, sign the permission slip while they're still in high school. So for my husband and myself at 28, 29, we were a later in life married couple. And so we got married, but because we were later in life, I kind of felt the pressure to start having children. And so I kind of pushed my husband, like, well, what are we waiting on? And things like that. And so then we started trying to conceive. And for about the first 6 or 8 months, it was kind of like, well, it'll just whenever it happens and things like that. Then after about the rest of the year, for that year, then I started doing ovulation kits and things like that, wanting to know, hey, when am I ovulating so that this could be a surprise? Maybe we'll be able to surprise the family at Christmas. And I had gone to a family reunion, and one of the family members was like, well, when are y'all going to have kids? So I really felt the pressure for that. And after about a year of trying, I knew that something wasn't happening, and it was time to go to the gynecologist is where I started. And my gynecologist suggested some different medications, make sure your progesterone levels are okay, things like that. And so we took creams and kept trying, but she said, I think you still want to go and see an infertility specialist, because after a year, you're considered infertile with what's the I forget the name of it. It's basically where they don't have a reason, but you are considered infertile. And so that's what
Unexplained infertility?
Unexplained. Thank you. Unexplained infertility is what I was considered. And so we went to the doctor and got all the measurements. They're measuring uterus and lining and all those things to make sure there's not tubal blockage and stuff like that. And none of that was happening. So we were thinking, okay, so then let's just do an IUI. And of course that didn't work. And then we went right into IVF, and we did the first IVF. We did the medicine protocol. Unfortunately, my body did not react well with that medicine at all. That was a bad round, but we did get one egg, and then my husband, combined with my husband, we then had one embryo. And so we put that back, and but we were told it wasn't great quality. It just wasn't great quality. So that led us to believe this probably wasn't going to work, but it was well enough to put back. It was still developing, and the cells were dividing and things like that. So we put it back and just kind of waited. And sure enough, we lost that baby. That was not a productive cycle. And so we mourned, and it was hard. And I mean, it's a death. When I met my husband, I just knew this is my guy, and we started baby planning right away. So we had these hopes and dreams of the names of the children. I wanted 4 little girls, and that was our plan. And so when you lose, some people treat it as it was just an embryo, but it wasn't. It was still a loss. I still remember how we had hopes and plans and dreams, and that just wasn't going to happen. And so then we went right back into the round 2, because we thought, okay, well, let's try it again. Maybe my body's getting used to the medicines or something like that. And so sure enough, for round 2, we had a better a better result with the embryos. And in fact, there were 2 this time to put back, and they were good quality. And so we went from not great quality to at least good quality. And we had 2. And so, in fact, the nurse said that the previous couple that she had seen with the AB quality, they had twins. And so we were really hopeful with this second round that we would have twins be done with this procedure. And so we did all the procedure. We went through with the IVF cycle, and then that one probably was the first time I wasn't hopeful. I don't even think it was on my prayer list, quite honestly. The second time I felt hopeful. We felt hopeful. We prayed about it. We even asked our church family to pray about it. And, but unfortunately, 2 weeks later, we got the call that I was not pregnant. And that was probably very hard, to the point that I was very depressed. I was very sad. I was very angry with God. I did not understand why this wasn't working. I didn't understand why we had done all the right things. We were married. We were doing it in His plan and His order. We planned to raise our children to know the Lord. I just didn't understand it. And that's where we kind of were, and probably spent several months in that state of depression. I was eating horribly, gained a lot of weight, angry a lot with my husband, angry with my parents, because I wasn't seeing them a lot, because I was living in Illinois with my husband. I was not living in Texas, and that's where my parents were. And so I really did not have a circle, because although I had a church family, it was smaller. They didn't know anything about IVF. They didn't ask any questions. I didn't volunteer a whole lot, other than we were trying. And I don't know if they felt we were doing something wrong, but there was just kind of radio silence. We asked for prayer. It was never publicly prayed, at least. And so that's just kind of where we were. And then the next year came about. No, I'm sorry, back up. At the end of the year, I knew within myself that I just wanted to be a mom. And so I wasn't so concerned about genetically speaking. I just wanted to be a mom. And that's another thing. I was like, well, if he's going to be a deacon or these qualifications, and so then why is God not letting this happen? And so then I thought, okay, so then let's look into adoption. Let's look into foster care. These are ways that I could be a mom. And then my husband was not sold on the issue, just because we have different backgrounds. In my family, there were lots of times where someone would come into the family through marriage, rather than through birth, or through, there was not that blood tie, but they were still your cousin or uncle so-and-so, and so it was just no big deal for me. But for my husband, he did not have that experience. And so he only knew family through the children that you give birth to. And so we sat down for a few meetings with adoption agencies, and had to kind of wait on him to process how it was all going to go for him. For me, I was sold. There are these babies. I get to be a mommy. I'm good. This is it. This is the way to go. And for him, it was just kind of, what is this child going to look like? What are we going to look like as a family? Which, not to say I didn't think about that. It was just more prevalent for him. And I had to understand that, although at the time I was probably more pushing about, well, listen, do you want to be a dad or not? And come January, at the end of that year, that agency that we were working with, to kind of meet my husband's needs. Sorry, let me back up. To kind of meet my husband's needs of what kind of child, what were we looking for? As an interracial couple, we were looking for a biracial child. And so unfortunately, this agency did not see a lot of Black people. They had maybe for that whole year 2 Black children and no biracial children. And so she recommended we go to an inner city adoption agency because we were outside of Chicago. So she said more inner city. And sure enough, that's where we went in January. We did a couple of classes with them. And by March, we had decided, I had kind of persuaded my husband that we could go through and start the process, specifically say, hey, we would like to adopt, and you start paying all the fees and stuff like that. And that's how ended up leading to, by August, we were matched with a family who were expecting in October. And it was between us and one other couple. And our son was born in October, and he came home, and I was a mommy, and forever changed at that very first adoption. And that's, it was just a magnificent experience. I did not understand why I had to go through the infertility part, but I am thankful that we have the adoption. And so we're rocking and rolling and raising our little one. And after about a year later, it's like, this is a piece of cake, being parents, because he was such an easy baby. And so a year later, we decided, okay, let's go ahead and do an IVF again, because we'll try to add to our family. And this time we did the IVF, and we had 3 embryos that were great quality. And so it was just like, oh yes, this is it. This is what he wanted us to do. Be patient, wait on him, as far as our relationship with the Lord. And okay, I get it now. Thank you, Lord. Here we go. But now we're going to move on towards our family. So we put the 3 embryos back, and that did not work either. We had a failed cycle. At that point, I went back to anger and frustration because, yes, I wanted to be a mom. Yes, I got to be a mom, but I just didn't understand the purpose for why we couldn't conceive. It was still considered undiagnosed, but it was at this point we had aged several years, and there was just things that we could try, but there was nothing really that they were giving us to be a sound like, oh yeah, your tubes are blocked, oh yeah, your uterus is tipped, whatever they could give you. But there wasn't that until after we finished and were talking about doing the 3rd one. So before we started it was kind of like, well, we're looking at your ovarian reserve, and there are advanced maternal aging. And so there's a little male factor, and these things didn't come about until after our 2nd treatment. So we were really blind, but they suggested using donor eggs and using donor sperm and things like that to try to mix it up. And so at that point, we just kind of said, well, if we're using a donor egg or we're using donor sperm, then why not just adopt again? Because this is still our child, but it's our child with a genetic material that I don't know about, or our child with his genetic material, and then the egg that I don't know about. And so I didn't have a desire to be pregnant. I had a desire to be a mom. And so after we did that third treatment, and he shot me, the progesterone shots is what he had to do. And he shot me, and that shot, I don't know what it was. It was an emotional breakdown. He shot me, or he put the needle in, and I burst into tears. And it wasn't because it hurt. I mean, I've done this 3 times. It hurts, but not to the point that it was like a death cry. It was a death sob. And at that moment, I knew I was done with IVF. I was done. And so I just had to tell him and see how he'd feel about that, because, it's just me. It's just, I'm the one wife. And if I'm done, then what is his other option? And fortunately, he immediately said, okay. I think he saw what it was doing to me personally, and physically, emotionally, and he was okay that we were done. And so we were just living our life with our one son. But I was sad. I wanted him to have a sibling. Probably about a year after that treatment, we kind of stuck our hat back in the ring to say, hey, we'd like to adopt again. And we got a call really quickly that there was a little boy in Florida, and all he wanted was a dad. And so it was like, okay, we can do this. We can give him a dad. And the one little caveat was, well, he has a little brother. And it was like, well, that's fine too. It's a baby, And so that's how I ended up being a mom of 3 little boys. And I'm definitely happy at this juncture in our life, even though the IVFs failed, I'm still a mom.
I love that. I absolutely love it. One thing that I love about your story is that you both had to be on the same page, right? You were feeling one way, your husband was feeling another way, and both of you all compromised each other's feelings, emotions, your
Yes.
body, physical health, right? As you're going through all of this. And then you both got to a point in your journey of moving forward or stopping with IVF and moving forward with adoption. So with your adoptions, are they considered open adoptions, or are they closed adoptions? This was a private agency that you use for your adoptions?
Yes, the very first adoption is completely open. And oh, Erica, that is such a blessing. And I know that for some people, I know there are families who it's not even known that they adopted. And so for us to have an open one is kind of shocking. For us, it would have been shocking. But for our son to know his first mom, who he came from, not only does he know his first mom, he knows his first mom, grandmother, and great grandmother. And isn't that amazing that he knows? Because what person doesn't want to know where they came from? And here it is. If we're having some issues at the doctor's office, I literally pick up the phone and say, hey, any chance that this was happening, in the family history or whatever? And they've come, mom and grandma came and spent the week with us in the same house. She taught him a family recipe. And that is the power of open adoption. No secrets. There's nothing to be ashamed of. This is what happened. And this is how you have blessed all of our lives. And so that's the open adoption. The second adoption that we got with the brother set, that is, I would say, semi-open, in that they know their first mom. Well, because they came to us from foster care, my oldest son knew her, remembered experiences with her. So he knew her. The baby did not. But of course, like I said, we don't hide anything. And so he knows that he had a first mommy. And they talk on the phone with her now, And so we have her phone number. We know her birth date. She calls for their birth date, and she's so encouraging to them. They want to hear that she loves them and loved them. And it wasn't like, I didn't want you or didn't want anything to do with you. And how empowering is that to a child? And so I'm thankful that we at least have that side of the relationship. And speaking of our second child, here's something that I'm really big on. Everyone's not going to adopt. I totally get that. Everyone can't or doesn't want to. Get that. I'm not judging. One of the things that I have been very focused on is how many Black people are not in the adoption circle, because in this situation, our son came to us from Florida. His first mom looked at 10 folders of couples who wanted to adopt him. 9 of them were in Florida. But what did she see for me? Although I was in Illinois, she saw my Black face. We're not a Black wife, Black husband. So she saw my Black face and she picked me, even though she could have kept her sons in Florida with her, where she'd have a chance to see them, run into them, maybe meet up at the mall. But she knew that really wasn't going to happen in Illinois, but she wanted someone who looked like them, could share their hair experiences, life experiences, things like that. And so one of the things that I have recently been speaking about is if someone is interested in adoption, just to know, especially as a Black person, person of color, just to know that we're needed and wanted.
Absolutely. And to your point about adoptions, when I was doing my own personal research, that a lot of people a lot of people were looking for more racially ambiguous kids, mixed kids, which is more difficult to do in certain areas, as you mentioned, like you all had to go to a different part to get that. But there are a lot of Black and kids of color that are in the foster care and adoption system. And that is another option as well, to foster to adopt, very similar that you did with the brothers. So I'm so happy that we talked about the open and closed adoptions, because I think with people, like you said, it's not for everybody. It may not be an option for people. But one thing that I want people to resonate with your story is that, even though you didn't birth these babies, you're still their mother, and they still have another mother, and then they know about them. It's the full picture, because, for a lot of adoptive people, they struggle with where their background is, who they belong to, being loved and cared for and adored. And to know that they have this overflow, this abundance, this overflow of love from their first mother, and you as their mother, and their father, and all these extended family members will only make them more well-rounded men as they continue to grow up in this world where, they're going to tear them down anyways, just because of the way they look. So I'm so grateful. I'm happy that we talked about that, because I'm happy that I asked that question, because I wanted to make sure people understood the differences between the two. Something else that I love that you said about just how you navigated through IVF and the failures of IVF, you didn't let that deter you. So I would love for you to talk more about kind of your thought process as you went through the journey, pulled the trigger, waited the 2 weeks, got the phone call, and, how did you navigate that grieving process?
Well, Erica, I did not do well. Let me just be honest. I didn't do well. As I said, I was in Illinois, so I had a small church family, and the only person I knew in Illinois was my husband. And that's how I got to Illinois. We dated a long distance for about 6 years while we completed undergrad and graduate school. And so then when it was time to, okay, now what are we going to do? I decided to move up to Illinois, and I left everything behind: cousins, aunts, uncles, siblings, mom and dad. And as I said, the church family was not very big. So I did not. They knew that I was going through, that we were trying to conceive, but not to the point, I am so sorry, not to the point to the point that they were involved in the process, not to the point that they were going to do a prayer circle, or that they were going to heavily participate or ask questions. And so I sat in silence during that time. I was mad at God, so we weren't talking. I was mad at my mom and dad because they weren't available. I was mad at my husband because I had to physically go through this and he didn't. Physically in my body. I never gave account. I'll circle back to how I changed my attitude on it. But for right now, in this thick of it, I was very self-centered in my pain, physically, emotionally. I was also mad at the church family. They weren't available to me. I had dear friends that I had known since 5th grade. We were the best of friends here when we lived here. But when I moved to Illinois, that relationship kind of dropped off. And so I ate lots of ice cream and chips. I would read whatever book that could kind of help me zone out and take me away, pretend to be something else, pretend to have a different life. Fantasy world was my thing. I would watch movies. That would be another type of fantasy world, just to dive into that situation. And I did not make any friends. I was very isolated and depressed. And it took, unfortunately, my first son's adoption for me to kind of check myself. Like, are you angry with your mom and dad? Well, you knew. I had to then kind of life coach myself. I made the decision to move to Illinois knowing that my parents don't fly much and I don't fly much. So how often did I expect to see them? I knew that just like my friend could pick up the phone and call me and say, hey girl, how's it going? I could pick up the phone and call her and say, hey girl, I'm not doing so well. Just the way that I picked up and ate a bowl of ice cream, I could have gone for a walk or picked up, made it little cup sizes of ice cream. These are the kind of things that I needed to kind of get a handle on. I was angry with my husband because he wasn't physically going through it. Well, of course he isn't. He's a man. It was all on me to do. And I had to look at what was he doing right. He was definitely there for me emotionally. And just like I grieved the loss of this idea of what our family was going to be, he was grieving. I was mad at God because he didn't give me what I wanted the way I thought I would get it. I should get it even. But look what he did do for me. I am a mom. I get to be the mom of this little baby and then these other 2 children, and they have enriched my life in ways that I just can't even explain. I'm a mom. I get to pour into them. I get to break some biological things that were kind of traditions in their birth line. We get to change those by having them in a supportive, loving home. And this is how God has blessed me. I am now able to turn all that crying and that trauma and that drama of infertility, and I'm able to turn that and now help other women who are going through it so that they can have joy on their journey. And that's how it kind of full circled for me to kind of take off all the blinders and the anger and the frustration and the jealousy and the shame. I didn't do anything wrong. I did nothing wrong. We didn't do anything wrong. And so what if this is God's way of saying, no, this is your purpose. This is what I want for you in your life. And I'm fighting it and angry with him, but I'm doing exactly what he would want me to do. I'm sharing his gospel truth with 3 children who may not have known it had they been in the homes that they were born into. I'm sharing his gospel truth with clients who may want to talk about that side of the infertility journey and their relationships with the Lord. So I really feel blessed that I've been through this struggle, because now I can use it to glorify Him.
Amen. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about your transition from, kind of being in those dark places to now being a light and being able to help, others as they navigate through their infertility journey. So what inspired your journey to become an infertility coach?
So, like I was saying, all that negative stuff that I went through, I know that women who go through those infertility emotions, just like I went through before we even tried IVF, life was not going the way I wanted it to. Keyword being, I wanted it. I wanted to get married. I wanted to then have 4 daughters. And I ended up with 3 sons, but I wanted 4 daughters, and then they were going to grow up and get married, and then we'd have grandchildren. And, this was my life, the way I pictured it. And so to have that smack in the face of, no, at one point, you're not a mom, you're not going to be a mom. And so the shame of that, because I didn't know anybody on my husband's side, on my side, who was dealing with infertility. So the shame of, oh man, what's wrong with me? Something's wrong with me. And the anger of, there were family members who were not in great, stable relationships, my judgment, and they were having several kids. And so I was angry that God would allow that, but not allow this. Those were just lots of really emotions that weren't serving me well. Did it serve me well to judge their situation? No. Did it serve me well to be angry at God? Absolutely not. It didn't serve me well to be jealous that someone else had what I wanted. It just didn't serve me well. And so I know that it's not serving anyone else well. How I got to it was kind of time and circumstances changing. But I think that by my services, someone else could come in and say, I don't have to. What if, they're not interested in adoption, or they're not available? I say someone, for instance, I know a woman who was interested in adoption, but there was a certain race of child due to her family makeup that they could adopt and couldn't adopt. So I totally get that too, for the safety of the child, emotional safety of the child. There's a certain child she would not adopt. And so when someone comes and they're like, adoption is not for me and my family, I'm choosing that we're going to have the 4-legged children, or I'm choosing that it'll be remembering that my husband and myself make up the family and we will be a childless couple, and that's totally fine. In that's what we've chosen. But to sit with that, to deal with those emotions, that's kind of where that came from for me to say I can help someone.
Yes, I love that. I think that a lot of us who are called to this work, I always say that we are wounded healers as we navigate through our own grief and triggers and things that come up, because we're still living with it. We're still dealing with it. We're still going through the emotions that we're able to pull from those deep, dark places and be able to help others pull through theirs and help them heal and get to the other side.
Yes.
So I thoroughly have enjoyed our conversation, and I would love for you to leave our listeners just some encouraging words, those who are navigating through fertility challenges, maybe considering adoption or any alternative paths to motherhood. What encouraging words can you leave with our listeners and those viewing this video?
One of the things that really resonated with me, I was listening to a completely different lecture, and it had nothing to do with adoption or birth stories or anything like that, but it was very powerful for me. And so this is what I started using as my mantra. You can find the joy in your journey it's a journey, but you can find the joy in it. And you have to remember that where you are right now is not forever. It is going to be temporary. It may be temporary for 10 years, but it's temporary. So your right now is not your forever.
Your right now is not forever. Now that is perfect to leave on. I love it. Thank you so much, Juauna, for being on the podcast. Where can our listeners and viewers stay in contact with you? Your website, if they want to work with you, where can we find you?
The easiest, fastest place to find me is on Instagram at Hannah's House Life Coaching. And that is also the website, hannahshouselife.coaching.com. We're on Facebook at Hannah's House Life Coaching, and there is a Facebook group for Hannah's House and Life Coaching. And that's where all the links are, and journal prompts and journal entries, and discussing with other women who are dealing with childlessness, however they define it, however they want to move through it. That's what that group is for.
Sounds good. Well, thank you so much. This has been a pleasure. Such a great conversation. And everyone, definitely all her links will be below. So definitely go in the description box or the show notes, and definitely go follow her and join in on the community.
Thank you.
Again.
Thank you.
All right. We got you recorded. Let me stop.